Sympathy and empathy cards are something that we don't like to make as card makers, but it's something that's necessary to have in our stash. So today's card is featuring a sympathy or empathy card using products from CottageCutz. This is Marla with Mad About Cards and Crafts. I'm excited to have you with me today. Here's a look at the dies I'm using. The three dies on the left are from the Christmas Part 2 release. The first one was called Rustic Wreath. The second one is Holiday Dove with Florals, and the third one is Christmas Greenery. I'll be using a Spellbinders 3D embossing folder, and then I have a pierced rectangle set also from CottageCutz. Here's two pieces of cardstock, one white and one gold. We are going to create an elegant sympathy card. I am going to speed this up a little bit and jump right in. I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel that is white, and I am going to go through my rectangles and we are going to create a frame. I'm going to use the larger one on the white cardstock, and you can see easily that will create my frame. And then I'll use a smaller one, and here I'm just auditioning how wide I want my mat to be. If you want a wider mat, you'll use a smaller rectangle. If you want a thinner mat, you'll use a rectangle that's closer to the size of the rectangle on your outside piece, which in my case is that white cardstock. You can see that I have die cut them, and now I have a matting for my card. Here is that embossing folder. I am going to spritz that frame with some water and take it over to my die cutting machine. I'll be using the sandwich that's appropriate for embossing. It's giving just a light little texture and a little bit more interest to my card. I will use some tape to adhere that frame behind the larger card front, and then I did cut that rectangle, the white rectangle, down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches because I did want to have a 1/4 inch reveal all the way around the outside of my card. I've die cut all of the foliage that I'm going to be using from the 3 different die sets, and I cut 2 of the doves. I wanted a little bit more thicker piece because I am going to place it in the corner of my card, and I wanted it to be able to withstand a little bit of movement as I mail it as I put it in an envelope, and if I need to stick it in the mail. Here I'm using my Misty. I do have another card panel. This is a black card panel. You can see where that 1/4 inch reveal is coming into play. I've cut it to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I'm centering my frame where I'm going to want it on that card panel, and we're going to do a little bit of heat embossing. I need to treat my paper with an anti-static tool. I'll stamp my sentiment using Versamark ink. And then I'm going to use Brutus Monroe's Gilded Embossing Powder. I am going with a gold, white, and black theme for my card today. This would be an elegant wedding card. Change the sentiment in the center, and it would be beautiful for a wedding or an anniversary. The design with the frame and the matting is very classic. You can change up your colors to suit the season, to suit the occasion. But again, this is an easy empathy card. The sentiment does come from the Greetery, and it is a faith-based sentiment, which for me is always perfect for those occasions when somebody is either struggling through a loss or struggling through a health issue. So for me, a faith-based sentiment is perfect. You choose what works best for you. You can change the size of your frame, as I mentioned. So if you had a smaller sentiment, you could use a smaller rectangle on that gold piece of cardstock, or whatever your matting cardstock is going to be to fit your sentiment. I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of this matting, so you can see that I do have the gold behind the white piece of cardstock. I did use a piece of tape and a little bit of temporary adhesive to get it in place, and now I'm using some foam tape over those seams, it's going to serve two purposes. The first is it's going to seal that matting in place, that gold matting, and also it's going to add a little bit of dimension to my card. I'll remove that release paper as I mentioned, and I'm going to center this, and right here, this card is elegant by itself. You could attach it to a top folding or side folding card base, and you would definitely be able to send this card out as is, but we're going to step it up just a little bit. I think the dove represents peace, and I'm going to add it as one of the focal points to the bottom right hand side of my card. I did add a piece of foam tape because I do have that dimension with the frame. I need to stabilize the dove by adding a little bit of foam tape to match for the head. Moving along, I am going to color some of my foliage pieces. I do this because I want to add a little bit of cohesiveness to my design. The white would fall a little bit flat with that white on white because I have that black background and that gold. So adding these touches of gold, I'm using my Gonzai Tombi Starry watercolors. There are several different shades of gold to choose from. And I'm using a brush that is slightly saturated with water. So I spritzed my watercolors with some water. I added water to my brush. This is Accent Opaque 80-pound cardstock. It is not meant for watercoloring, but for this technique it works very well because I'm not using a whole lot of water. I'm basically tapping that gold on. We don't need to be precise with shading or anything like that. We're just adding the color to the die cut pieces. I could have cut these die cut pieces from foiled cardstock, but the reason that I went with white was so that I could add different shades of gold. As you can see, that palette has 5 different shades of gold, and I'm using 3 of them. Some lighter, some darker. That yellow gold on the very end was the first one that I used, and then I used 2 tones on my pine cone. So the top layer has 1 shade of gold, and then the bottom layer, which will peek through the little holes that the die has cut, will be a little bit different, and it's just going to add some interest to the card. It's not all going to be monochromatic gold. It will have a little bit of variety in it. I did want to mention that I am giving away the Holiday Dove with Floral. This is, as I mentioned already, a very versatile set. There's some floral, some foliage, and then of course the dove that you can use for many different occasions. In order to qualify, all you need to do is leave a comment, like the video, and make sure that you are a subscriber to win that die. I did want to congratulate Rise and Procrastinate. She is the winner of the Christmas owls that I gave away in my last video. So she commented, liked, and subscribed, and she can contact Mary Marsh in order to collect her die. So congratulations, Rise and Procrastinate. I've layered up my flower. Now the rustic wreath has 2 poinsettias in it. I layered all of the pieces for both of the poinsettias to create one flower, and I offset each layer so that I have dimension on those petals. I'm going to add my top piece, layering piece, to my pine cone, and then we're going to clean up our desk and start building our card. So here's all those little gold die cut pieces. We have our card prepared for the foliage. I'm going to start with the gold pieces. You'll notice that I have the white ones over to the right, and these I didn't specifically choose any of the foliage. I just die cut, and I have a pile to the right that I can just pull from. I want to add the poinsettia to the upper right hand corner, and the reason that I cut the large pine cone was I like to do things in threes. So having three large elements, the dove, the poinsettia, and the pine cone, is going to be more pleasing to the eye than if I just had the poinsettia and the dove in opposing corners. I also made sure that I colored that poinsettia with the gold because it's going to contrast with the dove in the other corner, again adding just a little bit more interest to the composition. I'm layering more of the white foliage to the upper left hand side. I've added some of the gold to the bottom, and here's where I'm trying to decide, do I want that pine cone down where the dove is, or do I want it up where the poinsettia is? And I eventually decide that it's a little bit too busy and too bulky where the dove is. It's competing with that dove, and I want that dove to really stand out because, again, this is a sympathy card, and I just think that the dove is the perfect element to add to a sympathy or empathy card. And so I'll move that die cut up to the upper left hand corner. Initially, I have, you see that foliage that's dropping down. I will move that as well as the pine cone, so that is going to be more to the left, the upper left, and then so it's going to be kind of like an L is the way that I'm going to end up shaping that foliage. Once I get all of these pieces together, I am going to add the gold flowers. I start by adding it to the pieces of white cardstock because I like the contrast. And then I add one of the flowers to the gold, and I realize that it's not pleasing to my eye. So I do have some die cut berries out of white. I will add the white berries to the gold pieces of foliage, and I'm going to use the gold flowers on the white foliage, and I really like the contrast. I think that it balances just a little bit more. And as I put this together, you can see that it really is an elegant card. I love florals, and the holiday florals are good for creating cards year round. I wanted to share the versatility of that. Floral dies are some of my favorites because they can be used with so many different things. You can use them with critters, you can use them for wedding cards, birthday cards. There's so many different uses that you can get when you use floral type of cards, and you can pick and choose different elements. So you notice that I didn't use the wreath and the rustic wreath, but I did use those poinsettia flowers, and they don't have to be poinsettias. I mean, your eye is not necessarily going to read that that is a poinsettia when you look at it. It can be any different type of flower, no matter how you color it. I think it would be really pretty in purples and pinks. So don't limit your supplies. I've talked about this many times in my videos about not limiting your supplies to the seasons. There are some that are very obvious that can't be changed up, such as a Santa Claus, but the flowers and foliage that you find in the CottageCutz dies really do work for many different occasions. All right, so I'm going to get this last berry on here. You notice that I did not add any glue to the ends of my foliage. I do this most of the time. I like to have that movement. This is going to mail beautifully. All I do, I've mentioned this before as well, is I place the back side of my card where I address my envelope. So when I put it in, the front of my card is actually where the flap is going to come over, so that when it runs through the meter, it's running through the flat side, and I never have any issues when I mail these. I stopped here and I took some photos of my card. I thought I was finished, and as I was looking at the card, I wanted to add some more pieces to the backside of the dove, it wasn't looking cohesive enough for me. So I have 2 of these pine sprigs, and then I'm going to add a third little branch to the center. So I'll have a cluster of 3 there. Sometimes it's good to walk away. That's another tip I have for you. Sometimes it's okay to walk away from your card or to go back and add to it after you think that it's finished. We look at things from one perspective when we're creating, but as we walk away and come back and look at our cards, many times I can tell you that I've done this and I found missing pieces and I've added them, and it really just completed my card. So don't be afraid to step away and come back to your card and take a fresh look at it. I wanted to add a little bit more of that gold. Those white pieces really weren't cohesive. I have gold on every other corner, so here I added a little bit more gold to those pine needles, and that completes my card for today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video and some of the tips that I've given you. Here's a few looks at the card. Until next time, have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for watching.